All right, good afternoon. We're here to discuss a homicide that occurred over the weekend. I'm going to run through the scenario for you and explain what happened and where we are. On June 8th, at about 5:15, at 5403 Oakhurst Road in Seminole, the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office received the report of a body floating in the intercoastal waterway. So it was this past Monday, shortly after 5. The body was recovered and was brought to the shore. The victim had very serious head injuries and skull fractures that were caused by blunt trauma. The victim was identified as Charlie Brooks, also known as Charlie Madison, and she's a white female with a date of birth of February 8th, 1979. Through investigation, detectives learned that Charlie had arrived in Florida early Sunday morning from Fort Morgan, Colorado, which is just outside of Denver, which is where she had been living until recently. She previously lived here in Pinellas County in the Largo, Seminole, and St. Petersburg area. We learned through the investigation that Charlie came to Florida to visit Joseph Pope, who's a 36-year-old white male. Pope and Brooks grew up together and at some point in the past had a romantic relationship. We know from video footage at the Tampa International Airport, which you see here to my right, that about 5:40 a.m. This past Sunday morning is when Charlie arrived at Tampa Airport and she was picked up by Pope. So from the photographs, Pope is the male that you see in the photographs, and the female is Charlie Brooks as she got off the airplane. She took a red-eye flight from Denver to Tampa, arriving here at about 5:40 on Sunday morning. After they left the airport, we know that they went to Pope's residence, which is at 5426 Oakhurst Road in Seminole, which is one house away from where Brooks's body was found in the intercoastal waterway on Monday evening. A witness on Sunday morning saw a female who was later identified as Charlie enter Pope's residence. Pope lived at this address at 5426 Oakhurst Road, and he lived there with his mother and his father, who were both out of town over this past weekend. He occupied a garage apartment that would be characterized as a separate room or a separate apartment, if you will, within the home. Pope's 23 and 16-year-old sisters also lived at this location with him and his parents. Pope also had another adult sister who lives in Pinellas Park. During the day on Sunday, both sisters who live at that residence left for several hours. So Pope and Brooks arrived there early Sunday morning. The two sisters are there. They leave late morning, and there are times during the day on Sunday when both sisters are not at the residence. During the evening on Sunday, Pope was watching television in the living room and not in his bedroom, which his sisters described as highly unusual, because when he was at the home, he stayed in his room again, which is kind of a separate part of the residence. On Monday, Pope went to work at a local pool cleaning company. And then, as I mentioned, about 5:15 p.m. on Monday evening is when we received the call of Brooks' body floating in the intercoastal waterway. Because Pope lived a door down, and as part of our normal investigative process and the neighborhood canvass that we do, detectives interviewed everybody in the area, including Pope. Brooks had a distinct appearance in that her head was partially shaved. We know from talking to family members out in Colorado, in fact, she just had that done at a local hair salon last week out in the Denver area. Pope was asked by the detectives if he knew Brooks and whether anyone matching her description, again, this female with a partially shaved head, had been in his home, and he denied both. So this was on Monday evening. When a neighbor had told us previously that the neighbor had seen somebody matching Charlie's description enter the home, and he was confronted with this, Pope dismissed it and said it must have been one of his sisters. Pope also had a scrape on his leg that he claimed came from something that happened at work. Pope gave detectives other very inconsistent statements, and with other evidence we developed, Pope quickly became a suspect in Charlie Brooks' homicide. We established surveillance on Pope's residence from the land and the water because the home sits right on the intercoastal waterway. We also learned that Pope's sister noticed that the bed sheets from his bed were missing, which was very unusual. On early Tuesday morning, detectives obtained a search warrant for Pope's residence. Pope did not leave for work on Tuesday morning as he was scheduled to. At about 7:25 yesterday morning, one of our Marine Unit deputies recovered a black plastic trash bag floating in the intercoastal waterway behind Pope's residence. Now, it's unknown whether Pope saw the Marine Unit deputy pick up that black trash bag out of the water and collect it or not. He was home at the time, and we don't know whether he did. And that black trash bag is the one you see depicted here in the photograph. And you can see the items, or at least some of the items, and I'll talk more about them in a second, that were recovered in that black trash bag. The furthest to my left, or the furthest to your right, is a big rock that is covered in blood. And you can see in this photograph, which is closest here to my left, these items here are plastic gloves. You can see some sheets, you see the rock, you see other pieces of clothing, again, that are covered in blood that were found in the intercoastal waterway right behind his house. The rock that you see there depicted over on your far right is what we believe is the murder weapon. At about 10 a.m. yesterday morning, as detectives were preparing to execute the search warrant, Pope's sister, the one who doesn't live there, arrived at the residence. And shortly after that, detectives saw that she came running into the front yard yelling and screaming and was very upset. We were conducting the surveillance. We saw that she was upset. Detectives approached her, and she told them that Pope was lying on the ground on the side of the residence and that he was dead. He had committed suicide and shot himself in the head. Detectives entered the residence, determined that it was safe, no one was there, and they in fact found Pope deceased on the side of the residence, and he had used a .45 caliber handgun, shot himself in the head, and killed himself. The forensics evidence that we found at the scene reveals to us that Pope killed Brooks by bashing her head with that rock. And it appears after he did that he dumped her body in the intercoastal waterway. There was blood found inside Pope's bedroom and evidence that he attempted to clean the scene of some blood. There was also blood found outside near where Pope killed himself that doesn't belong to him. We believe that's Charlie's blood, and that's probably where the homicide occurred. We will not know for sure until the medical examiner's office releases its report, but from what we know now, it appears that she was killed and then her body was dumped into the intercoastal. The Pinellas County Sheriff's Office dive team responded to the area yesterday afternoon, and in addition to this plastic bag that you see here, they recovered a second plastic bag that was weighted down with a boat anchor and some additional rocks, and it had yet more bloody clothing in it, and that was found by the seawall right behind Pope's residence. So this is an ongoing investigation, and frankly, we will probably never know what caused Pope to kill Brooks in what was really a tragic and very brutal way. Her skull was bashed in. The other thing that we found in the bag, not this bag, but the bag that we found yesterday afternoon that the dive team recovered, were pieces of her skull, pieces of bone were actually in the bag. He brutalized her when he hit her with that rock. He hit her several times, and it was not good. We're probably never going to know what caused this and why. You can see here from these photographs, it appears to me that she was excited to see him. You can see that they're holding hands when they left the airport at 5:40 on Sunday morning. And from the best that we know is that her body was probably dumped in the intercoastal waterway sometime late Sunday, sometime Sunday evening. So something happened between this looks like enthusiastic greeting here at 5:40 a.m. on Sunday morning and sometime during the day on Sunday, And there was a window there, again, where the other sisters who live at the house were not there. And sometime late Sunday, most likely, when he dumped her body in the intercoastal. So, but we don't know. We know from talking to Charlie's mom that she had recently again been in contact with Pope. They were exchanging Facebook texts. They were back and forth on social media, and that she was coming to Florida to see him. So Pope's criminal history is very minimal. He had one misdemeanor arrest for possession of marijuana. Charlie Brooks does have a very extensive criminal history, a variety of charges. She's been in the Florida State Prison System. Most likely in her past and maybe even recently, probably a pretty serious drug user. She has several kids throughout the area, and it probably lived a pretty hard life. There's no evidence that anybody else other than Pope, who, as I said, is now deceased himself, is responsible for this murder. But the investigation will continue. It is ongoing, but I'm comfortable in telling you that there's nothing that the public or anybody else has anything to worry about. We believe that the person who committed this very brutal murder with that rock is dead himself. So,